Hello there and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is L24 World News Program. I'm Abdulrahim Kashur and these are your headlines. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, during the regular media meeting with the representative of the Algerian press, reaffirmed Algeria's consistent position on a number of international issues and crises. The first ship carrying grain has left early on Monday the Ukrainian port of Odessa under a landmark deal with Russia. Iraqi protesters and supporters of the Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr continued their breach of the Iraqi parliament for the third day in a row, as the political scene remains in ambiguity. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's top stories. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, during the regular meeting with the representatives of the Algerian press, reaffirmed Algeria's consistent position on a number of international issues and crises. Marwa Bel'awar tackled the story in this report.
Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune held periodic press meeting with representatives of the Algerian press on Sunday, in which he discussed national and international files and issues. One of the most important remarks the president made was Algeria's role in reuniting the Arabs and its capacity of giving the mediation to resolve certain conflicts. He reaffirmed Algeria's support for the Palestinian cause and added that it must unite to confront the occupation.
We stand with Palestine no matter who represents it. We stand with Palestine Liberation Organization as the only legitimate representative of the Palestinian peoples. Without unification, Palestine's independence will be difficult. Segregation makes Palestine a prey.
The Algerian president also talked about his country's disassociation in interfering in the affairs of the neighboring country, Libya, noting that it stood with international legitimacy just as its long-established principles had to stand with Tunisia.
Some behaviors lead to question whether there is a willingness toward the stability of Libya or not. We support legitimacy. We stand with all what is decided by the Security Council. With reuniting our brothers in Libya, with the Libyan solution with no intervention. And we are the only neighboring country, closest and biggest country regardless of the neighboring Egypt, who has never intervened in their affairs and who has always been present when they called us.
The Algerian president, who reiterated his country's position on the unity of Mali, stressed that the return of calm in Mali subject to the implementation of Algiers agreement signed in 2015.
As for Mali, the issue took long, and when political issues take long, they become hard to solve. As long as Algeria's agreement isn't applied, it will remain in its issues.
On the national level, President Abdelmajid Tebboune raised the possibility of Algeria joining the BRICS countries. He affirmed that Algeria meets to a large extent to conditions that enable it to join the BRICS.
Now, the commercial shipping line linking Algeria to Senegal was launched on Sunday with the ambition of strengthening trade between the two countries and getting the Algerian products to West African markets. The ceremony of inauguration of this new service was held in Port of Algiers and the presence of the CEO of the Algerian Group of Maritime Transport, Nadia Rabia, Director General of the Algerian National Company Navigation of the Mediterranean, Noureddin Koudil, CEO of the Port of Tianjin, Jijel, Abdeslam Webb, as well as the Ambassador of the Republic of Senegal in Algeria. To a different matter now, Iraqi protesters and supporters of the Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr continued the breach of the Iraqi parliament for the third day in a row, as the political scene remains in ambiguity. The Iraqi parliament could not make a real step forward in forming a new government for almost 10 months, which provoked unrest in the country.
Protesters and supporters of Muqtada Sadr continue to occupy the Iraqi parliament for the third day in a row after several clashes with security forces. The number of protesters swelled in the Green Zone area and mostly in the parliament. Followers of cleric Muqtada Sadr have pledged to hold an open-ended sit-in to derail efforts by their rivals from Iran-backed political groups to form the country's next government. Their demands include early elections, constitutional amendments, and the ouster of al-Sadr's rivals.
We went to the House of Representatives and protested because Mr. Muqtada Sadr said the choice is ours, and any revolution that does not have a leader will not succeed.
The sit-in appeared to be more low-key than on Saturday, when protesters used ropes and chains to topple concrete walls around the heavily fortified Green Zone in Baghdad, then flooded into the assembly building. It was the second such breach last week, but this time they did not disperse peacefully, as the Ministry of Health is still recording many injuries among protesters and security forces.
The federal court, since a long time, Midhat al-Mahmoud, head of the Iraqi Supreme Judicial Council, made the largest bloc in parliament, and they failed the rights of the Shiites. Today they created the bloc in third. The federal court did not take into account the people.
The developments have catapulted Iraq's politics to center stage, plunging the country deeper into a political crisis as a power struggle unfolds between the two major Shiite groups. This might lead to a further complicated situation of the country's political scene if there is no concrete and serious dialogue between the leaders of the acting parts.
Moving on now to the European continent, the first ship carrying grain has left early on Monday. The Ukrainian port of Odessa entered the landmark deal with Russia. This comes following the two sides, Moscow and Kiev, agreed a deal to resume shipments. An agreement hoped will ease the global food crisis and lower the price of grain. The Russian President Vladimir Putin on Sunday signed a new naval doctrine which cast the United States as Russia's main rival and set out Russia's global maritime ambitions for crucial areas such as Arctic and the Black Sea. The Russian president said that the Russian Navy would receive hypersonic Zyklon cruise missiles within the next few months, and that the area of their deployment would depend on the country's interests.
Enough to mention the latest Zircon hypersonic missile systems, which have no equivalent in the world. They know no obstacles. Comrades, their delivery to the Russian armed forces will begin in the next few months.
Kosovo police said that they closed two borders crossing in the volatile north after local Serbs blockade roads and fired shots at police in protest in order to switch Serb car license plates to Kosovian ones within 2 months. Air raid sirens were heard for more than 3 hours in the small town of North Mitrovica, inhabited mainly by Serbs. This has raised concerns about the possibility of fresh unrest in the Balkans.
Once again, I ask the Albanians to come to their senses. I also ask the Serbs not to fall for provocations and not to do anything that could lead to any conflict.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived in Singapore early Monday, kicking off her Asian tour. The visit comes as questions are mounting over a possible step in Taiwan, which has fueled tension with Beijing in recent days. In a statement over the weekend, Pelosi said that she will also visit Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan. Clashes erupt between the Zionist settlers and Palestinians near the village of Al-Mughayr, not far from Ramallah, where 400 Palestinians gathered in the area to protest against settlement. A 16-year-old boy, Amjad Nasrallah Abu Alia, died of his wounds after being fired open with live ammunition during clashes with the Zionist army. Lebanon's armed Hezbollah group issued a video on Sunday showing vessels involved in the Zionist offshore oil and gas industry and warned against playing with time, underlying its threat of military escalation amid Martin border demarcation talks. Hezbollah shared the video before the arrival of the U.S. envoy Amos Hostian in Beirut to push talks to resolve an increasingly tense Martin border dispute between two parties over Mediterranean waters with offshore gas fields.
I remain optimistic that we can make continuous progress as we have over the last several weeks, and I look forward to coming back to the region and being able to make the final arrangement.
Clashes between Taliban forces and Iran border guards on Sunday have left at least one dead on Afghanistan side. According to the Iranian authorities, the fight had erupted after Taliban forces tried to raise their flag in an Iranian territory region. People living near the border on the Afghan side fled their homes to take cover when the clashes intensified. Inflation is on the rise throughout the economy, but it's hitting the housing and the rental markets the hardest. Housing is often Americans' biggest single expense, especially for the working class. Families are battling to guarantee the shelter with the rising of housing prices that is making life more difficult. Soaring prices are hitting several parts of the world. Australia has recorded its highest rates of inflation in more than 20 years. Costs of food and energy are expected to be accelerated even further in Australia. Nabil Khazini on what follows.
Paying more for everything you buy. Australians know a spike in prices never seen in more than 20 years. According to data released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the Consumer Price Index rose 6.1% over the last 12 months. More people now in Australia go to food banks to get their daily groceries more than before. And automotive fuel prices rose by 32.1% and the price of new houses by 20.3%.
Consumer durables, from motor vehicles down to small household appliances, where price increases are largely the result of disrupted supply chains from around the world and increased shipping costs, which is a global.
The Australian government says some of the factors affecting inflation were outside of the country's control, including China's COVID-19 policies and the always to be blamed for inflation, the conflict in Ukraine. With forecasts predicting that the Australian inflation will rise to 7.75% by the end of this year, Australia's Treasurer laid much of the blame for the economic difficulties on the former coalition government, saying they failed to design sustainable energy policy and to invest in the local economy.
The current expectation is that it will get worse this year, moderate next year, and normalise the year after. We haven't reached the peak yet, but we can see it from here.
The global gas crisis is also affecting Australia. A watchdog warned one of the world's biggest suppliers of the fuel could face a shortfall and soaring prices next year. The countermeasure hasn't yet been decided, and Canberra didn't reveal whether it will curb exports of liquefied natural gas or not.
To the African continent, thousands of protesters rallied in Sudanese capital Khartoum on Sunday, calling for an end to this military rule. Clashes erupted after hundreds of demonstrators attempted to head to the Republican Palace, Sudanese presidential office, but they were met by police, who responded by firing tear gas at the protesters. Video shows demonstrations chanting slogans against the military, which overthrew a transitional civilian government in 2021, delivering a devastating blow to the Sudanese pro-democracy movement that toppled President Omar al-Bashir 2 years earlier. Now, on the other matter, on Sunday, Senegalese cast ballots to choose the nationals, or rather the nation's representatives before the presidential election in 2024. These elections will serve as a crucial item test for opposition parties attempting to limit the dominance of ruling party. Mariam Tian on What's Follow.
President Macky Sall's ruling coalition claimed victory in Senegal's legislative elections, but the opposition rejected the assertion as a prefabricated majority. Former Prime Minister Aminata Touré, who led the ruling coalition's list in the legislative election, announced the partial results on national television from the party's headquarters early on Monday after Sunday's vote.
We've gained 30 departments, so there are 46 departments in the country. So I think that's clear. We won North Africa, we won West Africa, we won Central Africa. This unquestionably gives us a majority in the National Assembly.
Barthélémy Dias, a leader of the main opposition coalition, headed by former presidential candidate Ousmane Sonko, spoke of vulgar lies. The opposition had hoped the elections would impose a cohabitation or divided government on Sall and curb any ambitions he may have for a third term.
The cohabitation of the campaign is inevitable. You're not going to run the National Assembly with a majority you've prefabricated.
Some 7 million Senegalese were eligible to vote in the election, which passed without any major incidents. However, turnout at several polling stations appeared relatively low.
I've heard that there are many people who abstained during these elections. Is that in my neighborhood, people went out to vote, but that's not the case across the country.
The political backdrop in the country of 17.5 million, considered among West Africa's most stable democracies, has become increasingly bitter.
Soldiers returning from leave to a United Nations intervention brigade in Democratic Republic of Congo opened fire at a border post, leading to an unknown number of deaths. The incident of Congo-Uganda border post in Kasindi in the western eastern part of the country in the latest involving peacekeeping mission in Congo, which has come under pressure from days of protests. At least 32 people were killed in Madagascar after local bandits set homes on fire. The killing took place in the Ankospop district, about 75 kilometers north of the capital. The attack on the area was likely revenge by the Dahalo against community members for providing information to security personnel during previous operations against the team. A section of the huge grain silos of Lebanon's port of Beirut severely damaged in 2020 explosion that killed more than 250 people collapsed on Sunday after weeks-long fire triggered by grains that had ignited in the summer heat. There were no reports of deaths or injuries following the partial collapse. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main top stories. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, during the regular media meeting with the representative of the Algerian press, reaffirmed Algeria's consistent positions on a number of international issues and crises. The first ship carrying grain has left early on Monday the Ukrainian port of Odessa and the landmark deal with Russia. Iraqi protesters and supporters of Sheikh Muqtada Sadr continue their breach of the Iraqi parliament for the third day in a row. That's all we have so far for now. For more updates over the stories, follow our pages and over the social network, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Bye-bye for now.